When I went to college, I had a double major, and I thought it was very important, and it's helped me not just to have a technical background, but I also have a pretty variety, like liberal arts. Knowing philosophy, knowing political science, knowing economies, economics. All of these different areas, I think, really I use to help with those soft skills, because sometimes it's not always money. It could be philosophical difference, and it could be based on politics. It could be based on economics. It could be based on reading the same paragraph and coming out to two different meetings.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Zenergy Podcast. I'm your host, Karan Takhar. Today, I'm thrilled to speak with Mona E. Dajani, who I refer to as the Harvey Specter of energy and is the global co-chair of energy infrastructure and hydrogen at Baker Botts, one of the world's leading law firms. We explore a journey into the energy sector, how she structures deals for large-scale renewable projects, and one of her most challenging yet rewarding deals. Mona shares valuable advice for lawyers and developers, insight on essential soft skills, and the impact of the Inflation Reduction Act on deal structures. She also offers guidance for the next generation of clean energy leaders. I hope you enjoy this insightful conversation with Mona E. Dajani. Hello, Mona. It is great to have you on the podcast. Thank you so much for taking the time. I've been looking forward to speaking with you, just given all of the incredible work that you've engaged in across the energy sector. And to kick us off, could you just provide a brief introduction and share about what drew you to the energy sector to begin with?
Sure. Well, I started my career as an engineer, and then decided I didn't like it very much. So I went to law school, and then I also was getting my MBA at the same time. And then I was doing traditional, like, oil and gas transactions, and then I was given an opportunity to work on a wind transaction. And so now, 25 years later, that's all I do, is just representing investors, developers, lenders in transactions involving clean energy all around the world.
Very cool. So as I was researching for this interview, I saw that you've worked across hydrogen, renewables such as wind, like you just mentioned, carbon capture, and more. If you had to select one of these emerging technologies, which you think might have the most potential to revolutionize the energy world over the next decade, are any of these technologies, do they particularly stand out, or do you take more of the view that it'll be a combination of these technologies? And like, how do you just look at it as someone who's worked in the space for such a long time?
Yeah, I mean, the way I look at it is it's a combination of all of these together, right? They all have one thing in common, which is to help save our planet. So, they all have different ways of doing it. Some are, like you said, I mean, I've been involved with solar, wind, storage, EVs, carbon capture, hydrogen, ammonia, all of these. And I'm really excited to see what's going to happen in the next 10 years. I'm seeing tremendous developments technologically that are bringing the cost down for certain of these technologies, which is really exciting. I'm also seeing, and I'm putting together, this is something I'm really proud about, different deal structures so that, to maximize as much as possible the incentives, the location, who the deal counterparties are, et cetera. So I'm really excited altogether. I think we are, as a whole, the world, we're seeing the devastating effects of climate change in some of the severe climate that we're seeing, with hurricanes and fires and very hot temperatures and such. So I'm expecting a lot, and I'm seeing a lot of technology wise. One thing I'm personally very excited about is just the advancements that I'm seeing for all the different applications of hydrogen in particular, in using in hard to abate sectors like steel and transportation. So super excited.
That's amazing. And regarding the deal structure specifically, so as you mentioned, you've been involved in structuring a variety very complex energy deals. Could you shed some insight into some of the unique challenges that come up when you're creating these deal structures specifically for large scale renewable projects? And you also mentioned how you're creating or working to create innovative deal structures that make these projects commercially viable. Could you talk some to that as well?
Sure, yeah. I think what makes it really exciting in the clean energy space in particular is that there's a lot of different tax and incentives that we also use to bring down the cost of the overall transaction. So that means that we have to try to use everything at our disposal, whether there are incentives, whether there are different parties, counterparties on the other side that can contribute and be part of the deal. So it's very creative. It's not like completely bilateral. A lot of the times, both parties, or there'll be several different parties all coming together in the transaction, and each one is contributing something different. But I think that what makes it challenging in clean energy in particular is, the bottom line is, developers want to scale. They want to, rinse and repeat, and they want to grow and get bigger faster. And the way to do that is to have money. And for those companies that don't have unlimited money, and there's quite a few, we look at monetizing everything that's available to us, whether it is, tax incentives, tax credits, whether there's we give a premium to counterparties that would be interested in being involved in the transaction. So that's what makes it very unique. And then many times we will when we're doing the acquisition, we're also doing financing. And many times there will be like two other separate transactions that are going on at the same time. One just for monetizing tax equity, and another for capital, just regular, back levered capital for the sponsor. So they do get very complicated, but it still makes it interesting and very exciting, and love thinking outside the box and being really creative.
Yeah, as I was doing research for this interview, I was like, wow, Mona is like the Harvey Sector energy deals. And that's a huge compliment because I love Harvey Specter and love that show as well. To make it more tangible for the listener, could you walk us through one of the most challenging or rewarding deals you've worked on? As in, like, what were the key obstacles and how did you and your team navigate them to reach a successful outcome in the end?
Sure. I would say one of the most difficult transactions, but also rewarding, that I worked on involved about 9 different counterparties that all came together to do the deal. And all of these nine companies were very large, were publicly traded, used to calling the shots whenever they have a deal. And I had to get all of them to agree on a baseline on who was going to have control. And we call it governance, for the company. We formed another company, and each one bought a certain amount of that company, and who was going to lead and who was going to what were some of the items that everyone was going to decide together versus those that were based on the amount of equity that they owned. So what made it difficult was getting everyone to agree when they're all like prima donnas and used to getting their way. So we had to go through governance. That was probably the biggest. A lot of the different companies had their own technologies and patents, and they didn't 100% trust everyone. So it was not just the actual transaction, but where they were all participating together. But it was the other difficult piece was getting everyone to agree and moving forward instead of going backwards, taking two steps back, which is very easy to do in a transaction, not to mention having nine different players.
That sounds really complex, but congratulations on getting it done. Does any piece of advice come to mind that you would give to someone who's working on a similarly complex, maybe not that complex, again, Harvey Specter level, not everyone is there, but any advice that you'd give to lawyers who are working on navigating these complex deal processes, or even developers? Because I also imagine it requires a lot of soft skills, like being able to bring people to the table. So I'd love to hear your take on that.
That's a great question. And just to boil it down, and you hit already some very important points. It's really critical when you're an attorney trying to negotiate the deal to everyone's satisfaction to really have those soft skills that you're talking about, which is not to take sides, to try to be as neutral as possible, and really try to understand what is the outcome that you want to get at. And usually the outcome is you want to close the deal, or you want the deal, to be consummated, et cetera. So it's very important to have those soft skills. And when I went to college, I had a double major, and I thought it was very important, and it's helped me not just to have a technical background, but I also have a pretty variety, like liberal arts, knowing philosophy, knowing political science, knowing economies, economics. All of these different areas, I think, really I use to help with those soft skills, because sometimes it's not always money. It could be philosophical difference, and it could be based on politics, it could be based on economics, it could be based on reading the same paragraph and coming out to two different meanings. So I think it's important to always keep on growing, keeping abreast of world events, because I think they're all connected. I also think it's important as part of the soft skills to be kind, because you don't know where someone is coming from. You don't know their baseline. And I always try to be nice and kind and respectful. And it also throws people off sometimes, which also helps.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. Earlier, you mentioned how many people don't have unlimited money, many businesses.
Yeah.
Some do. Might have
Some
to get
appear
some of
to,
those people
yes.
on the podcast to ask them how one can get to that place. But for those who are like kind of just starting out or on the smaller side, developers, what advice regarding structuring deals do you have for them? Like, do you work with smaller developers? Or are you primarily focused on the larger deal structures? And because oftentimes smaller developers are unable to potentially pay heavily for like legal fees, is there anything that comes to mind on like how you advise smaller businesses to navigate the deal process to get their initial projects up and running?
Yeah, so let me make an analogy, okay, for your listeners. I think it's really important. You could go, you went to the doctor and you find out that you need heart surgery. You could go to a heart surgeon that has the expertise and the knowledge and is completely up to date on all the technology, or you could go to another doctor who's a generalist, who is cheaper, maybe in another country even, that is not up to speed on everything and doesn't have the expertise. I don't know about you, but if I was a developer, I pay the extra money to go to the surgeon so that I won't die. So for those people, you pay for what you get. And if you don't have the money to get the best people around you, then don't do it. Don't even start. Don't waste your time because you'll die.
That was a powerful analogy.
I just want people to realize that, in terms of trying to, besides getting, the best help that you could get, not just legal, but there's also other advisors, investment bankers and such that you can also use, and you always should, like, always surround yourself with people smarter than you.
Mhm.
But also what you can do is, besides saving money, is a couple things. One is to partner with someone or some company that has the money and give them a piece of the equity, of the project. Another idea is to, save until you have it right, or you have some type of patent on some technology that's really amazing, that some other bigger company that has money that would be interested in, and you can leverage that either as it could be collateral as part of a lending package, or it could be something that you leverage with a counterparty that they would get something out of it too. One thing that really is surprising that I see a lot with younger people that don't have a lot of experience in the space is that you got to think about the other side and their reaction to things and not think 100% me. You have to give something to them. And I always think that way. And I think that way also when I negotiate deals. What does the other side value that is not that big of a deal for me to offer? Or maybe it is a bigger deal, but then I want more in return as a baseline.
How do you generally figure that out? What does the actual exercise look like for you when you're trying to understand what do they value? Just curious, because I think it's such an important point.
Yeah. You know what? There's two ways to find that out. One is to ask the question. And the other one is it'll become clear. Like they may say something, and then while you're going through the negotiations, they keep on coming back to a certain concept. It may be described differently, but the concept is there. And you just have to, this is what good lawyers that do with a lot of experience, they can deduce from the context, from the conversations, from their reactions on what they really value as well. So it's a combination.
Makes a lot of sense. And
Yeah.
I have to get in a few questions on the evolving landscape in the US, which we did touch a little bit upon, but specifically with the Inflation Reduction Act coming into play, introducing new mechanisms like tax credit transferability? Have you seen a changing landscape, as in are new entrants entering this space, and like what opportunities or challenges even do you think this new ability to transfer tax credits will create for developers and investors?
I know that this is, I'm going to say this because I know that a lot of this is going to be dependent on going forward who our new, if we're going to have a new administration or not, new president. We haven't had that election yet. And I will say a couple things. One is that I don't think the elections are going to be that big of a deal to the IRA. I think that all in all, a lot of it is probably going to stay intact, regardless of who our next president is. There will be some tweaks, there will be some changes. And I can tell you, like from the tax equity world for transferability, when it first came out, we all thought that this was a really huge game changer, but it turned out it was kind of a dud because it for a number of reasons. It actually made it harder. So it wasn't as great as developers first thought it was going to be, because it's still expensive to do. There's still high transaction costs associated with it, among other things. So I hope I answered your question.
I'd love to hear more about what other things, as well as the transferability costs. Like, are there any ways that you think or you would recommend that specific transferability stipulation could be amended?
I don't think that it is, basically, what it does is it allows entities that can't use elective pay but do qualify for eligible tax credit to transfer all or portion of the credit to a third-party buyer in exchange for cash. And the buyer and the seller would then negotiate and agree to the terms and the pricings. And there were some final regulations that stated that transfer election can only be made for a credit that has been determined with respect to the applicable entity or the electing taxpayer. In other words, that applicable entity or electing taxpayer must own the underlying eligible credit property. So it's still, there's still restrictions that prohibit this, and it would have to be completely rewritten. But I think it is it is an opportunity to help achieve decarbonization goals on a national scale. And and I think that this was it's still, it was released, the final regs on this was released in 2023. It's still viable. There's still many market participants that are modifying their existing structures to create new structures to provide alternatives in using or selling the tax credits that are generated by the project. And the industry is adopting creatively to embrace these new structures and allow this. And at the end of the day, bringing in new investors and lowering the cost of capital for clean energy projects. So, but it was not, but there was some shortcomings, from the perspective of the project owner. It doesn't capture the full value of the tax credits because they're sold at a discount. It doesn't generate a step up in tax basis. So absent further structuring the credit in the case of an ITC deal, for example, and depreciation are based on the project's cost instead of the fair market value. And it doesn't facilitate the monetization of depreciation. So we've seen a lot of hybrid structures we're putting together a lot of hybrid structures that combine the traditional partnership flip with a transfer that addresses these shortcomings and increases the value. And it also allows existing tax equity investors to expand the market through syndication and facilitate entry of these new tax credit buyers who can rely on the due diligence and previously conducted. I don't know. I think that was overkill.
Oh, that was great. That was great. And final question, we only have a minute left here. As we look into the future of the energy sector, keeping it broad, what excites you the most? Do you have any final thoughts or advice for the next generation of leaders who are eager to make their mark in the clean energy space?
Yeah, it's really easy. Don't give up. Be resilient. There's going to be a lot of rejection. There's going to be a lot of doors closed. There's going to be a lot of even doors slammed in your face. And that's also not just for developers, but also bankers and lawyers too, as well. Just be resilient. Look at the big picture, which is to lower, save the planet, lower emissions, decarbonize, net zero, and just keep going.
Thank you so much, Mona. It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast and really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much, Karan. That was great.
Thanks so much for checking out the Zenergy Podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, please take a moment to rate and subscribe to the podcast. It would mean so much to me and the rest of the team. We release episodes every Thursday, so stay tuned for all new episodes featuring industry leaders building a cleaner, greener future for us all. See you next time.